6 o'clock. I'm going to call the public hearing together. Tonight is about Democracy Day. Would the clerk please read the roll?
Mr. Amrine?
Here.
Mr. De Leon?
Here.
Mr. Kuhar?
Here.
Ms. Rosenberg? Here. Mr. Sidoti?
Here.
Mr. Turner?
Here.
Mr. De Leon?
Here.
I need a motion to excuse Mr. Ferrer and Tracy Wallace.
So moved.
Second. Second by any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you.
We need to do that on this type of meeting?
Yes. Just a roll call.
A public hearing.
Public hearing. Welcome to our October 4th, 2023 Democracy Day public hearing with Kent City Council. According with Article 12, Section 12.05 of the City of Kent Charter, notice was hereby given to the Kent City Council was to conduct a public hearing to examine the impact on the city, state, and nation of political influence resulting from campaign contributions by corporate entities. We ask that when the court calls your name, you come to the podium, give your name and address for the record, and speak clearly, and we'll give you 5 minutes to share your concern. If possible, and you have your concerns in writing, please leave them with the clerk before you leave the room tonight. Amy, first person.
Greg Coleridge.
I wanted to preface Greg's talk with thanking Kent City Council for 8 years of Democracy Day and supporting us. And the main thing is the Ohio Supreme Court voted 7-0, I think. And here we are, all these years later. Greg is the co-director of the National Move to Amend.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Bill. Good evening. I'm Greg Coleridge from Cleveland Heights, 3016 Somerton Road. I'm the co-director of Move to Amend. That's the national campaign seeking to enact the what's called We the People Amendment, HJR, in the current House of Representatives, to abolish the twin constitutional doctrines that money, political money spent in elections equals free speech, and that a corporation is not a person, legal person. Questions to everyone here. Do you feel your voices to federal and state public officials are authentically heard, your needs met, your community served? Do you believe that the governing rules of our society are fair and just? That the interests of the wealthy elites and major corporations are no more responded to than your interests and those of local businesses? Should the super rich and corporate entities be allowed to spend as much money as they want lobbying and donating to political candidates? Should fossil fuel corporations have the a fundamental decision to mine, frack, and burn fossil fuels that threaten a livable world? Should insurance corporations have the final word on the health care you receive rather than your doctor? Should banking corporations have the ultimate power to decide how much money is created as debt in our society and where it's distributed? Should agricultural corporations be able to avoid labeling potentially harmful ingredients on consumer products? When asked these and many other questions to people across the country where I've made presentations, the answer by well over 90% is a resounding no. It doesn't take a PhD in political science to know that our political system isn't broken, but rather is fixed. One doesn't have to be a constitutional scholar to understand that a corporation is not a person and that money is not speech. More local public officials like you here in Kent are increasingly opposed to more fundamental decisions that in the past you've made to protect the health, safety, and welfare of residents are now being preempted, usurped, or dare I say trumped, to benefit the super rich and corporate behemoths. It's not surprising, therefore, that ending all corporate constitutional rights and money as speech is gaining support. 70 House co-sponsors of HJR 54, nearly 500,000 individual petition signers, 749 organizational endorsers, 8 states, and over 700 communities that have passed municipal resolutions or citizen-driven ballot initiatives like those here in Kent. The fundamental rights of people and the rights of communities directly decrease as the rights of big money in politics and corporations increase. It's an inverse relationship. It's like oil and water. People power and corporate power simply don't go together, never have and never will. Corporations aren't mentioned in the U.S. Constitution. Corporate entities weren't originally chartered or licensed one at a time. They were originally chartered or licensed one at a time, as you may know, by state legislatures, including here in Ohio. That booklet that went around describes some of that history that existed long before we were around, in which basically the default was that corporate entities were defined by we the people through state legislators. In terms of the actions, the terms of their actions were defined in their charter. If the corporation violated the terms or broke the law, the state legislature or state courts revoked their charter, with the company going out of business. These are the actions of self-governing people, individuals who understood the appropriate relations between we the people and corporate entities. That relationship was that of superior versus subordinate. In 1900, a ruling to dissolve a dairy corporation, the Ohio Supreme Court said, quote, "The time has not yet arrived when the created is greater than the creator, and it still remains the duty of the courts to perform their office in the enforcement of the law, no matter how ingenious the pretext for their violation may be, nor the power of the violators in the commercial world," unquote. Corporate constitutional rights and money as free speech were not intended. They're not inevitable or irreversible, but rather creations by activist Supreme Court justices working with the wealthy class and corporate attorneys. What's been done can be undone. It's up to us. We all have a role to play. Residents, citizens, public officials. It begins with not accepting the legitimacy of corporate personhood in money as speech, despite the fact that we live in a corporate culture. But even that culture is changing. I end with an apt quote from the first 10 minutes in the recent film, Barbie. I don't know if many of you have seen that. I haven't, but several friends of mine who have said within the first 10 minutes, they sort of spit out their popcorn when they heard that, I guess in the first 10 minutes, there is in Barbie land sort of a Supreme Court made up of all women, who says, quote, "In Barbie land, corporations are not people and money is not speech," unquote. Indeed, the culture is changing. It's up to us, as part of a larger democracy movement, to affirm that only people are human persons and that money and elections can be regulated. Changing the culture goes hand in hand with changing our governing institutions. That includes amending the constitutions. We all have a role to play. Thank you very much.
Okay, do you have a copy the clerk could have of that?
I do.
All right, thank you. Next, Amy.
Bill Wyland.
Actually, I have a petition. If people here would like to sign it, the Move to Amend petition, I'm going to hand it out. Thank you.
How many times could you say?
One of my main targets of all large number
Bill,
of corporations.
Excuse me, can you give your name and address for the record?
Bill Wyland, 867 Stonewater Drive in Kent.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No.
All right.
We got to keep our records right.
Sure. One of my main targets of all the large number of corporations that use their money to support candidates running for office and further use their money to influence decisions made by their politicians are the big oil and gas companies, Exxon, Mobil, Shell, for example. The money they pour into elections to get their way is legal because corporations have the status of personhood, according to Citizens United, the Supreme Court decision in 2010. And money is a form of speech. A democracy should not legalize corporations as persons, quote unquote, speaking with their dark money. Corporate campaign donations through super PACs not only increase the total amount of money politicians raise in each election, but dilutes everyone's voice. If a corporation can give a politician millions of dollars through super PACs, the self-interested politician Politicians certainly are going to prioritize that company and its views more than its constituents the politician represents. This undermines our democracy. If we want to change corporate money in politics and keep this trend going, we're going to have to impact what corporations focus on most, their bottom line. Their bottom line is the money they make, especially when the stock prices keep rising. How can I become active and try to impact oil and gas corporations' bottom lines? I'm a member of a local National Association of Investors stock club called WAMPM. Obviously, our focus is making money from buying and selling stocks. We meet monthly in Stowe, and a small group of us recommend a stock to buy each month, and we decide by listening to information and data presented, and we vote. We currently have about 25 stocks. But each time an oil stock is presented by one of our committees, I vote against it, regardless of its investment numbers, even if they look good. My reasoning, which I tell our group, is that purchasing any oil and gas stocks helps sustain greenhouse gases and hurts science's supportive effort to reduce CO2 and save our Earth from extinction. I'm a strong supporter of renewable energy. Our current climate emergency is primarily caused by fossil fuel corporations. I'm thinking about making a greater contribution to try to reduce Big Oil's bottom line by contacting all 64 of the stock chapters in the United States and present my green position against Big Oil and try to persuade them not to purchase oil and gas stocks and to sell those that they may have in their portfolios. This obviously is a much more idealistic than realistic perspective, but I know I'm going to feel better because I'm doing something to try to reduce the moneyed influence that big oil and gas have. We need to act. After all, the gas and oil industries have been playing us as fools. So what kind of Democracy Day action do you want to consider to make this transition from a corporatocracy to a democracy? Thank you.
Thank you. Further anything?
Barb Hipsman Springer.
Bill, do you have that? Does the clerk have a copy of what you?
Yeah.
Okay.
You usually can hear me. This is Barb Hipsman Springer, 978 Garden View Street in lovely Kent, Ohio, which my granddaughter, 7 years old, calls quaint. She tells that to everybody in Oregon. I'm here tonight to honor, first of all, Tim Smith, who many of you knew as a lawyer and professor in our school for many, many years, who was an open records authority, nationally and locally, and a dear friend and a colleague whom I really respected. My message is a little different than Bill's. It's much more local, of course. As we all know, the issues of Democracy Day and control by big money extend to many parts of our society. And as you all know from years of seeing me around, my background is journalism. First, I covered small villages and towns, tubas, on the school districts. Eventually, I moved to the State House and Judiciary, and for 28 years, I taught public affairs. Many of my students knocked on your door many times, many times. And I look around us today and realize that that when we talk about big business or talk about how dark money is affecting politics, we should really be taking into consideration what big business is doing to democracy on a local front in a different way. It's affecting the transparency of democracy right here in our town. It's got no fault through you guys. I'm not pointing any fingers at you. It's society the way it's working. Nearly every newspaper in this country has been bought out by a bigger business and not necessarily a newspaper business or a news group. What's happening is we have hedge fund operators. We have huge companies, the same ones that are running oil companies, running newspapers, monopolies, unknown trusts buying up newspapers like the Record Courier and the Beacon Journal and driving them into the ground for profit. Papers that had 150 reporters like the Beacon now have 12. And then they just walk away. And while they aren't extinct in our country, newspapers, it's getting pretty darn close. hence why some journalists started the Portager.com, and many of you are familiar with it. Mr. Kuhar recently took an ad in the Portager, I hear. And that's good. We encourage that. We don't make money with the Portager. It's, by the way, it's printing the voter's guide for us for the League of Women Voters, which should be out before an actual print edition will be out, much like we did with the Record Courier for many years. But once again, when the Record Courier was sold out, that went by the wayside. It cost $700. I think I could have found 7 people in Kent to pitch in $100 if I had known that for the 3 years we didn't publish. It's a big piece of information that a lot of people rely on. For those of you more online, vote411.org went up online today, so it's live. But it occurs to me that without common knowledge like the voter's guide, or a newspaper, or a TV station that's local, so you just don't get the same information. You can't share the information. You can't tell people. You can't discuss it in your neighborhood because 9.5 out of 10 people on your block hasn't heard about it. And so it's impossible to get back to your local councilman, although I do like to call Jack. But that's the problem. What are some solutions? In order to have a democracy like the city of Kent survive and thrive, you have to have information that's common knowledge. So recently I suggested to City Manager Dave Reller that a very cheap way for the city to get information out is an online newsletter. Yes, it takes a person to do it, but at least quarterly or monthly. I love the quarterly one, but could we do it monthly? Could we do it weekly? Every single city council person should be thinking about having an email newsletter in their wards with people who sign up. It's not like mandatory or something. If you want to hear from your councilman, you sign up to get the newsletter. All it is, hey, here's what's going on in our area right now. Here's who you could call if you want to talk about it. And in fact, that would solve a lot of problems at the city level, or at least start to solve them, because you could update people. Offering solutions to problems in neighborhoods and answer whatever questions they have more quickly, and squelching rumors so that your staff, which already does a heck of a lot, doesn't have to be bothered with so many phone calls and emails, and et cetera. I'll finish my democracy thoughts with this. As journalism goes, so goes democracy. If you don't have common information, you're letting the big boys take over. Right now, we're on a very thin line that I see that may cost us segments of a very local part of our democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Barb, did you give a copy to Amy?
Amy and I are on first name.
I understand that. Further, Amy?
Thank you. I'm not sure, but Mr. Andrew Rome, were you speaking tonight? Okay.
All right, please.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello? I'm not sure how to adjust the microphone. Close enough. All right. Hi, my name is Andrew Rome, and I'm the director of Haymaker Farmers Market in Kent. I'd like to thank City Council and the organizers and advocates for Democracy Day in Kent for offering an opportunity to address local government about issues that matter here in our community. Haymaker Farmers Market does not work on the issue of big corporations influencing government. Rather, we're part of an alternative. Haymaker is a 501c3 federal nonprofit public charity whose mission is to connect producers and consumers of local food and agriculture in a vibrant, sustainable, community gathering place with direct access to food, education, and the arts. We see this connection between people in Kent as essential in our community. And we focus on these relationships, which is very different than a big corporate model that prioritizes profits over people. Customers at the market can talk with their farmers and learn about how carefully they steward the land, and then customers make the choice to pay a slightly higher price, and they see the dollars reinvested in the community and know that the farmers deserve to be paid fairly for their work, or they just like delicious food. Our model that focuses on local foods and local people has been working. In 2022, Haymaker Farmers Market saw our highest ever customer attendance.
with over 39,000 people counted at our year-round markets. Last year, we saw a dramatic increase in food assistance distributed through Haymaker, with over $90,000 of local foods provided to local people who need them, with our food producers paid fairly for their work. Everyone deserves healthy, fresh, local food. We also saw the highest ever sales, with over $800,000 of vendor sales in 2022 based on weekly vendor surveys. I think that's just an incredible sales figure, especially given that the market is only open 3 to 4 hours a week. The numbers are important to show success, but the real goal is the kind of community we want to create in Kent. It's a great time of year to come to market now. Come and see for yourself, bring a friend. This is the Kent that we want to showcase. I want to thank City Council and the City of Kent for the chance to speak today and for supporting Haymaker Farmers Market. Other than staffing, our two biggest expenses are rent and music, and the city helps us with both. As a year-round market, we move indoors in winter and rent a church hall for the season. But the 8 months that Haymaker sets up on Franklin Avenue, the city maintains the parking lot and leases it to Haymaker Farmers Market for $1. Thank you for that support and for the recognition of the value that we bring to downtown and to our city. Haymaker also plans a free public concert series at Market every week of the year, supporting local musicians and making local food a celebration. The city's Celebrate Kent grant program has funded our downtown concert series since 2011. Thank you. I think Haymaker Farmers Market is a great example of the kind of positive community that comes from government working for the interests of local people rather than the interests of big corporations. I'm proud to be here in Kent serving it with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Further, Amy?
Nope, that's it.
I need a motion to adjourn from our Democracy Day.
Anyone else? So moved.
Second.
Second by Gwen. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thanks for coming tonight.
Yeah,
and
thank you, everyone.
We'll do our thing again.
You know, it'd be interesting, Mr. Mayor, you know, it would be interesting.
I'll watch this.
Wait a minute. Go ahead, Roger.
Well, I was gonna say, it'd be kind of interesting, did anyone hear something that really touched them, that they learned, or something new with I'm just kind of curious. You know, we sit here, how many years have we been doing this? 8 years, Mr. Mayor? And I often wonder about what people are thinking when they leave, you know, because it's one thing to express yourself, or some people express themselves, some people come here to listen. I'm just kind of, maybe Barb, it's the old teacher in me, right? We're kind of curious, aren't we, about things? So I'm just kind of curious. Yes?
I like the second guy who said he contacts those stock corporations and lets them know what's going on. Your green agenda.
Wow, that's good. Yeah. So, Bill, you've impacted someone.
Well, it's idealistic, but that's as realistic as I
Sure,
can do it.
sure.
How about the other way around?
What's-
You've been hearing this for however many years from council.
Oh,
What
yeah.
kind of impact,
Well,
if any?
I'm going to answer partially that. We sent our letters out, and I think within 8 years, I think we got 2 back at the most. You know, what makes me wonder, and we understand how you feel and what's right and wrong to each one of us, is are we doing this at the right level?
What is that?
That's feedback from
mic.
Mr. Mayor there.
What's that?
Through your mic back.
Oh. Like I said, are we doing this at the right level? Should we be taking it to the next level? I don't know, it's just my thought.
Yeah.
But protesting in the streets and marching down.
You gonna get your John Deere tractor out again?
When you mean next level, what do you mean?
Well, I don't know, maybe it should go down to Columbus. I don't, and I guess we're just in a discussion here, I don't think anybody around this table is getting money from big business, believe me, to run for office.
Just
Peop-
as an
the-
FYI, this has been introduced.
The people that are getting the money aren't in Kent, Ohio. So, who had their, Amy? Or Heidi, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I want to apologize for missing most of your presentations this time. I had to work late. and I will watch the tape, I promise. But I want to say that I think one of the most powerful things was something that Andrew said, which was we're creating an alternative here in Kent. It's one thing to talk about losing our democracy, but to create avenues for citizen participation and to help empower people is really, I think, really key. And to create alternative kind of culture is also a buffer, at least, to help democracy thrive, at least in pockets. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate the citizens of Kent and how much we value our voices.
Roger, we really adjourned, Roger.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just keeping it going a little bit. No, I would say that one of the most frustrating things for me is that we're extremely supportive of small businesses. I know personally, I have a tremendous respect for entrepreneurs who, their daily lives, their existence is running a business in a city like Kent, Ohio, and they sometimes go without a paycheck to make sure that their employees are paid. The problem I think we have sometimes in this country is being able to talk about being pro-business but not pro-corporation. So many times I have friends who they knee-jerk response to the, dare I say, political position that they think they have to support, which then with a broad hand basically denigrates all businesses. And it's not true. I mean, if it wasn't for small businesses, our country wouldn't be one of the greatest countries around. So I think somehow the politics have to get out of the conversation about corporations. That corporations are not it's not pot, right? Corporation are bread and butter businesses, you know, our machine shops that are out here, are all these different places. Corporations are those entities out there that truly are actually controlling small businesses also, and are hurting small businesses because their ability to control Congress, their ability to control politicians. So I think we need to figure out a different way of conversation to make sure people realize that you can be against Citizens United, but really be pro-business. I think that we don't know how to make that conversation, but that's for my 2 cents, and Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I've sat here for 8 years, though. Listen,
I got it. Why, Roger, the teachers comes out at Roger all the time, and Jack. I mean, that's good. We're still learning. But you know, I've belonged to 2 retirement companies. I couldn't tell you where my stock is, half of it. You know, it might be in petroleum. It might be in this. You know, there's no way of telling, and there's no way you can control some of it. So. Oh, John, let's
Sure, why not?
You're it.
You know, I know dozens of single people that are one-person corporations. And so maybe the tune ought to be big money is not a vote.
I like that, John.
All right, let's move on into our committee night. First up is committee of the whole. Would Melanie please come? We're going to give an update on the City Hall.
Absolutely. Good evening.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
A little earlier, aren't we?
Well, how can you do Board of Patrol? You're the only one here.
She's not coming. We'll do it at the end.
All right. I guess you'll have to. Go ahead, Melanie.
Well, the good news that Mel and I were saying on the way down, for those that will come to this every year, there'll be a much nicer facility in next year for this.
Yes.
Yes.
So that'll
You'll have
be good.
your council chambers. It'll be wonderful. No backfeeding, I hope. It'll be good. Just a real quick update. I know it doesn't look like we're doing much, but we are on the inside. The second and third floor have the rough-in electrical inspection, and that is completed. The water mains to the building have been tested and inspected, and that water is running. The brick is continuing on the north side of the building, continuing around, and if you looked today on the back side as well. The curtain wall is in fabrication, so that is your large atrium areas. That is in fabrication now. The roof is complete with the exception of stairwell B. Our gas main is scheduled for the end of next week to be installed, so we'll have gas. So if the weather should start getting cold, we could, at the very least, go ahead and put some plastic up and make sure that we're heating on the inside. And then finally, once the curtain walls are done and being ready to be brought out, then they'll go ahead and start measuring for the windows and get those in on the back side and the front side of the building. So it doesn't look like there's a lot going on out there, but there's a lot of little ants on the inside of that building really making things start to take shape.
Any questions for Melanie? Seeing none, good job again. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for Committee of the Whole. Health and Public Safety, Mr. Amory.
Yes, the first item on our agenda is the solar eclipse. So Joan is wearing me out over this solar eclipse thing, so I said it's time to wear council out then. Let's share in it. No, I mean, it's a good thing. It's not just Joan. I'm teasing but there's a lot of activity around emergency preparation for potential of large numbers of people. A lot of times when I mention this to my friends or family, they look at me and they roll their eyes and say, who's going to go to that? Well, Joan's got stats, and I don't think she's going to scare you too much tonight, but there are people, I mean, they're projecting hundreds of thousands of people to come to our area, and so that's great until they all have to use streets, use restrooms, sleep somewhere. Maybe they need emergency care at some point. They need food. We need food while they're here. Shopping places are already worried about running out of food. Hotels are booked already, the ones that are taking. So there is a lot more to this than I see John's face. That's kind of how I sat through these meetings. They keep inviting me to these meetings, and I look like that, but now I'm starting to go the other way. So, Joan, with that horrible intro, go ahead.
Thank you so much. So I think my nickname is Chicken Little or something, like the sky is not always falling, but my son's embarrassing motto at home was, you can't have fun until you know you're safe. So, safety leads to fun. This is falling, a lot of great activities planned that are going to be great educational-wise and fun-wise, but we want to make sure we're safe so that it can be pulled off seamlessly. So, I just have a little bit of basic information. I don't know if you can see this slide. Are you aware of the fact that the arc of this eclipse that's going to happen on the 8th of April is going to be 124 miles wide, and it will cover part of Portage County. And so we should experience somewhere between 98 to 100% view of totality. If you think back to 2017, it was kind of a big deal when we had that partial eclipse, but that was only partial. This will be full. So we want to make sure that everybody who wants to come and see it, or even people here, have that opportunity, and especially to take part of all the plans. So in terms of facts, this eclipse is 187 days away. The last total eclipse was in 1806. I don't think many of us were around then. The next one the next one will be in 2099. I don't think many of us will be around for that one. So it's truly a once-in-a-lifetime experience unless you're willing to travel. And many people are willing to travel to see eclipses. So totality occurs between 12 o'clock noon and 4 p.m. in the afternoon, so it'll gradually start to darken. The eclipse should happen in Kent somewhere around 13 after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then it should be done about 4 p.m. So it's not just going to be a quick on and off, although the eclipse might be just 3 minutes, but there'll be a process leading up to and after the fact. The other thing that I just want to make you aware of is that this is a much wider path than we had in 2017. The duration is longer, and it also covers a greater swath of the United States population. And they have said that up to 70% of the nation's population lives within a one-day drive of the eclipse. So people are likely going to be motivated to move so that they can see this once-in-a-lifetime event. And I know, like Dave said, it's so far away. You're starting this so early, right? But it'll be here before we know it. So it's important to plan. The Kent Area Chamber of Commerce, Main Street Kent, as well as some businesses are excitedly planning a lot of activities over a 4-day period over this weekend. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then the eclipse is Monday. So there will be lots of activities to take part in. Ohio has been planning for this for about 18 months now. And the City of Kent is meeting to discuss safety and logistics. As with any event, there's always, it's like when you're planning a birthday party for a 3-year-old, you have to do a little planning for it to be pulled off well, right? So we want to make sure that this goes along with the reputation that Kent has for having great events. So I just wanted to give some basic resources too, and let you know that there'll be continued follow-up as plans are confirmed and other concerns might come to light. We'll let council know. So thank you very much for your attention.
Questions? John?
Gentlemen, will people be coming to see the eclipse, or will they be coming for the party?
I think they'll be coming for multiple reasons. I think that there'll be some serious scholar types that will come, but there'll be people who are coming for the party. There'll be people who are just coming for the great events that Kent will throw. Yeah.
Heidi?
So safety issues, will we be distributing safety glasses?
I think it will be up to individuals to purchase their own, to get a hold of their own. Just like in 2017, for the partial, you were asked to wear some type of safety glass. So I don't know. Melanie has ordered some for city workers. I don't know if there'll be those designated for, or if you'll have to get your own. Yeah.
Building mask.
Are they for city council? So but I don't think it goes for family, right? It's for the city employees, but not their families.
You can make a box, right?
You can make a box. You can make a box.
They'll be for sale.
Yeah.
I'll sell boxes that I make myself.
Jerry?
I guess my question was the same as Amy. What's the availability of these glasses? That's what I'm getting now.
Well,
Where can they buy them? Where are they going to be distributed at?
Amazon. Well, you're going to have a set, but if you need more for your family members,
No, I think
you
it's
get 'em
the
on-
general public where I'm getting them from.
Yeah. So there are NASA-approved glasses, and actually at some of these websites, they tell you what to look for in terms of purchasing, so you don't just purchase something that's a sunglass and not really a safety glass that will protect your eyes.
Okay. Further? Anyone from the audience? Barb, you need to...
Down in West Virginia, I was down by the New River Gorge, and
Get them online.
they were all over the counter. And I thought, oh yeah, there's an eclipse coming. But I didn't buy it. They wanted $3.
You could have made a fortune. Sold them for $5.
I'll be selling them downtown.
So this is just informational, so thanks so much, Joan.
Right. I just want to make sure that everybody's aware. Everybody has a different level of awareness. I've been geared into this for some time. Other people are just now finding out. I just wanted to make sure council was aware, and especially in terms of the activities that are planned, too.
Thanks.
Yeah.
My guess is there'll be vendors selling those.
Yep.
Vendors selling the...
Thanks, Jeff.
Ms. Wallach is not here. She wanted to talk about idling car, that we're going to move that to November. And so the next thing on the agenda is 24-hour parking limit. Jim? Yeah, this motion, just to remind you, came from a resident who actually is one of your future colleagues, Melissa. So she had made the request to council at the microphone, and you all referred it to staff. So we sent it back to our transportation, engineering, and safety group. Took a look at it, came up with maybe an option. We didn't. Jim will explain. There were some concerns with the full bore, citywide, no parking or any parking anytime kind of thing. So we backed off that. And anyway, we've also kept her. She's not here tonight, but we met with her out in the at her place and talked. Nick talked to her too. So I've emailed back and forth. So I think even though she's not here, I think she'd say we're trying to help her come up with a solution because she's very committed to this. She's made it very much a priority, even though she's not on council yet. So anyways, Jim.
Sure. Sure, thank you. Sorry about that. As Dave mentioned, there was a request to revise or investigate revising the citywide time limit that's in section 351.13. Please note, there's a lot of different parking regulations, and this one was very specific to that section. In that section, it talks specifically about storage of vehicles. It always says parking and storage. Not every other section is like that. So in that section, it's focused heavily on the idea of someone bringing their vehicle in the public space for some, it gives it hours. But then the second sentence, you can't just move it to another spot and just keep it in that right of way. So it's focused on storing, it's not focused on overnight parking. That's a different section. And it all is under the premise of spots that are permissible to park in. Okay, so that they've already been looked at and said, yeah, someone could park there. So this was focused on a very targeted problem. Potentially, because it was passed in 1964, and none of us were here to confirm that.
I was. Jerry.
I was. And it's on my street, too. That's the problem.
Some days I'm happy to be only 52. So the committee, I want to say one other thing. There's another section of the code, that's section 353, which goes street by street, what times and what locations you're permitted to park in. So sometimes these get confused, but they're different. So the Traffic Engineering and Safety Committee reviewed the potential benefits of making the citywide change as requested, and the potential consequences that may come about if you make such change. Understand that, at least in the 15 years that I've been here, I don't ever remember this coming up in TE&S before. So we typically don't jump before we hear something. So what we came up with, the main benefit of extending the time limit is basically sort of summarizing, you provide additional land to park/store private vehicles within the right of way. That is a benefit. Okay, that would be one of the benefits for doing this. And that may be desirable to some people. And that's the other thing important to note is that the benefits and consequences in this are based on an individual's perception. It's not based on, like, is there a safety issue or some other issue, because the parking's allowed there. It's just whether we want people storing cars there. So with that being the potential benefit, the potential consequences, we still look at it if we change it to some manner of time or eliminate it altogether. So take these in that context, it's not necessarily going from 24 hours to 48. It could go from 24 to 9. That's what we were looking at. And the consequences were not consistent throughout the city. If you lived in one neighborhood, you may have a problem that would want it. If you're in a different neighborhood, you may like, it's not my, it doesn't affect me here because I'm in a different neighborhood. So the most consequential potential problems were in some specific neighborhoods, typically centered around Kent State University. The concern being freshmen coming in, live on campus, but they're told to park in Summit East, and they have to pay to provide a vehicle. It may be easier for them to park on the street in the University Woods neighborhood and be closer and not have to pay if it was permissible. And this one section of the code would address that pretty specifically because it's talking about storing vehicles. And it's not, so around the university you have those, Flats 345 is a great example. There's another one, it's student housing. The parking is not all on site, there's some at the deck. I spoke with Larry Emling from the university yesterday about...
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
And I was on a roll. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I can hear myself now. So I talked to Larry at the university, and he was telling me they're receiving calls about people from Flats 345 that want to park in their parking lots that are closer than they're able to park. So you can tell there's this desire to find a better solution for them. The other thing is similar in areas around the university, so higher density housing. So we've always tried to have single-family residential neighborhoods. We try to protect those. That's been very important to the community for a long time. If one of the things that prohibit that is trying to change it to rental housing is how much parking is available. Well, if on-street parking becomes available to store vehicles, then that makes it more likely for those kind of uses to fit in there. From other issues, and I consider these more citywide, but they're more minor in nature. I mean, if the time is extended, you're going to see abandoned and broken down vehicles stay in the right-of-way longer. You're going to see a few more cars there when we're trying to plow snow or clean the street. And I'm not talking just when it's more than 2 inches of snow. We plow snow when there's less than 2 inches, too. So those would make it more difficult. So based on those things, TE&S doesn't recommend changing that citywide ordinance for the amount of benefit that we perceive, nor for the amount of complaints that we've heard. Nick checked, there were 4 tickets in that area over like 59 citywide or something like that. Yes, so from a citywide standpoint, we don't think it would be a good idea to consider that. However, recognizing that all neighborhoods are unique. If you are living in Forest Lakes and you're in a newer development with wider streets and you're farther from the university, then maybe it wouldn't bother you as a resident to have more cars in the street. But I'm guessing if you're in University Heights or around the university, what we hear is they don't want that. If you look at the parking restrictions around the university, they're almost all set up to prohibit people from parking there and going to school, go to classes. So we felt if council desires, we could investigate looking into allowing flexibility into this section. Instead of it being strictly by citywide, maybe it's can be tied into the other section of the code, which is 353, where it could be sort of directed. I think I just heard what Councilwoman Schaefer said, an avenue for citizen participation. If you want your neighborhood to be able to do this, and you can get 50–60% of your neighbors to sign off on a petition and look at it, then it can come back and we can look at it to see does it work. And that may be possible, which is already done now for anything in that section, that 353 section. Now, just so you know, 1 second, there's things we would have to look at. We'd have to look at the code. We haven't talked to Hope about it at all yet. We'd have to look at how it would be signed. Since it's not universal citywide, we'd have to sign it to let people know what areas are different. So it's not something that we can guarantee, but that's something that we could look into.
Okay. Heidi?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you bringing up the issue of protection of neighborhoods and also the concern over rental creep. Because right now it's my understanding that landlords have to provide adequate parking for their residents. And the guests may come and go. Like on my street, it's 2-hour parking, so guests can come and go, and often they stay a little longer after hours when there's less of a chance of getting ticketed. But we don't have the car storage. My question, and I know what would happen if somebody brought a petition around in our single-family homeowner dense neighborhood, although it's a mixed neighborhood really. But what about the neighborhoods that are really leaning more towards student type of rentals or rentals, where landlords would have an interest in the street turning into parking storage, car storage? Could they not bring a petition around, being the property owners, and get 70% if there's 70%, say, rentals in a neighborhood? What are the exact rules of that?
Well, currently what the rules are, and I would anticipate this would follow that, but we haven't looked at this specifically. Currently what the rules are is a property owner they would contact Patty, Dave's assistant,
and say, you know, we would like to change this parking regulation. Specifically, it's typically time and where the location to park. That then would come to engineering, and we would lay out a limit of where that would be. It wouldn't be allowed just in typically one house, one area, one side of the road. Typically, we look at an area.
Several blocks.
Depending on the request. Each one's a little different and unique. We would draw a map which would show them, here's within the limits that you would have to get signatures on, and then that would be provided to them with a petition from Patty. They would have to go out and get it. Then it comes back to the city once we know that's a serious request from the neighborhood. Then traffic engineering and safety would look at it, either recommend it or not recommend it, and then bring it to council, and you guys would approve it either way. So that's how the process works now. I don't see that being any different in this regards.
John?
Jim, why couldn't you work out something like, well, you know, you naturally would have 2-hour parking on all the streets that allow parking. If a resident would get a permit to show that they lived within a block of a certain area, they could park on the street up to, but not to exceed 23 hours.
That's exactly that type of what if this, that thing, way, 'cause all possibilities exist. And we're not saying that what is best. What we're saying is it should be best by neighborhood, not by citywide, to make a change. So if a neighborhood came and wanted to make that kind of request, they could make that kind of request today, and we would look at it and then give you a recommendation from here. But understanding, thank you. Well, understanding once what you give in that, what you described there, required some oversight then in issuing permits and other things that we typically try to stay away from. So
You know, I've seen a couple municipalities that are short for parking that utilize resident street parking fairly successfully.
Correct. And I think where I've seen it, it is typically in very old neighborhoods that were developed before the car was prevalent, and they're small lots with large buildings on them. They're very walkable. It adds to the character of it, and usually the streets are very narrow, and they found that that's best to work for them in that regards. I'm not saying there's not a neighborhood in Kent that wouldn't benefit from that. I don't think any of us are. But we believe that having the residents say that in their petition helps say that this is how they want their neighborhood to be, because how you park it will directly impact the neighborhood feel. So.
I just wanted to address real quick, you mentioned the 23-hour thing, and one of the things that I would say from an enforcement standpoint on that is the only mechanism we really have to be able to say if a car has been there, how long a car has been there, is our parking tablets. They go and they mark where the valve stem's at. We're not allowed to physically touch a vehicle anymore, so we can't chalk the tires or anything like that like we used to. So to say how long a car has been there, if it's moved at all, and I know one of the things that Jim mentioned was technically the law says that if just because the vehicle's moved doesn't mean it's not being stored there. The only way we legally have to be able to show and prove that, though, is if the vehicle has not been moved because of where the valve stem's at. That's the only way we can say that it's actually being done.
Could you not, in the way you write up your code, have a general area where, you know, where you're permitted? And I think what you'll find is if you have an offender, it's going to be the same offender. It's not going to be, you know.
I guess the point that I'm trying to make, though, is to be able to sustain a ticket on appeal. Ultimately, if a violator is not satisfied with the appeal process through our department, they can ask us to issue them a long-form traffic ticket that goes to a judge. Now we're in a court trying to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this car has been there for 23 or 24 hours. And the point is, with the whole movability of the vehicle, we can't prove that in a court if that car is moved at all.
But how many people would go to that extent if they got a ticket for 24-hour parking?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Jerry?
Wasn't part of this concern that was brought to us was Morrow was doing her job by doing Northborough and Pioneer Avenue, and some tickets were issued out, and part of the concern was, well, we didn't know it was against the law. Well, we got a 4.5-inch thick book. You know, there's none of us in this room or in this staff knows exactly every one of those ordinances.
Except Hope.
I'm
just kidding.
Oh, I'm sorry, Hope does, we think. Anyhow, wasn't that part of the complaint? So some of it is self-serving right now.
So I think I know where you're coming from, and there were a couple issues we discussed with parking. I think that particular issue about not knowing the law or not being aware of it had more to do with the angled parking downtown and parking head-in. So that's the part I remember in the emails about people saying that they didn't know, not specific to this issue.
If you don't mind.
I think it went further than that.
Yes, the people who approached the resident had gotten a ticket.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I can see some problems backing up here. Where you have changing neighborhoods, and we start getting to issues where owner-occupied properties as opposed to rental properties, those are starting to change. People feel their quality of life is diminished by now having people coming in who don't necessarily live in an area but are taking up spots or leaving vehicles in areas, quite frankly, that we don't have the ability to really police. You're starting to pit people based on, say, and who's going to sign the petition? The person who owns the property, the people who live there. That can go off the rails pretty quick. So I'm a little concerned about that being in an area like that. I understand because, quite frankly, Melissa used to live just a few houses away from me. We had that problem down there. I'm concerned about that becoming a problem again because, quite frankly, we're a neighborhood in transition. So I'm a little concerned about the implications of not having something necessarily hard and fast. I see the flexibility we're allowing. That's well and good. But boy, that's going to be a little different when it comes to enforcement, especially now since I didn't know that they had determined that you can't even, and why do they not allow the police on right-of-ways to be able to assess how long a vehicle's been parked in a right-of-way?
So before I let Nick answer that, I just want to say, remember, we're saying if you direct us to, we could look into this. We're not saying we have to or not, we did. So, I mean, you want to answer that?
So the issue of chalking tires came up. It was a U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, U.S. Appeals Circuit Court ruled that physically touching the vehicle is an unreasonable search. We can still use our the parking tablets. The compliance officers can use the parking tablets. They essentially take a picture and then they do some things in the tablet to mark where that valve stem's at, so we can ensure that it's in the exact same spot, and we can issue a ticket that way because we're not physically touching it. But you can no longer chalk a tire because apparently it's a search. I don't know how they came up with that ruling, but they call it a search.
Where do you put the ticket?
That's a really good question.
Mike?
I do like the idea of looking back, because all those little things for each one of these streets was put there for a reason. And I said, one of the biggest ones is probably college students. And I'm not gonna beat up on college students, but when they move out of the dorms and they get into their first, you know, house, they can do whatever they want. And I've lived through my college students for the last 40 years, and I get a new group every year. And, you know, that's one of the things, that's why some of those, the 24-hour parking limit was good on some of those streets. But like I say, I'm glad that each one of those streets is documented, you know, for different reasons, because that way you can go through that and see if it needs to be changed. So I like your idea.
Roger?
Yeah, Jim, so let me ask you a question. If we were to say we come up with something and the community, the neighborhood petitions and we allow overnight parking. So my neighbor next door to me has a third or fourth car, and they park it on the street and they put a car cover over it, and it sits there for a year and a half. Does that, I mean, what recourse do I have, especially if he puts it in front of my house on the street, right? Because that's all public property. The question is how would there be any appeal process to that, or?
I think that example that you're expressing.
This is extreme.
It's extreme. I don't see that getting T&S approving that, recommending that and coming to you. I don't think at any time will we go unlimited for, you know, 3 months, 2 weeks. I don't think we would allow that, because we need to have the ability to, you know, like you said, have cars moved out of the right-of-way if there was a need. We've not talked about it. I'm saying that because I've thought about it, but no one else in T&S probably has gone through it. But that's one of the things we would have to look at, is define what kind of time limits would be reasonable in the areas. I'll give you an example, a personal example. I went to Savannah in April. In the very old part of town, there was an inn. I parked for 4 straight days, never moved my car. Okay, bought a pass and was there. But that's the only way the inn would function. They didn't have a parking lot. Okay, that's not us, right? So it's, or not any neighborhood that I know of here. So the key is going to be finding out what fits well within a neighborhood, as well as like what you say, what you're suggesting.
If they thought it through.
If they thought it through, correct. And we wouldn't just like say anything that someone requests, just send that through. We would still look at it and give you our thoughts and opinions, and then we'll bring it to you.
Yeah, so if you like the idea, we would go back and try to refine it based on the neighborhood by neighborhood or street by street. But again, if you don't, that's up to you too. We're not here, we're trying to give you the option so you don't just have to, we felt like citywide was almost too problematic, right? You know, it's too coarse of a cut. We need more fine cut. So to at least, you know, try to respond respectfully to the citizen, we came up with this as an alternative, since we kind of already have that methodology in place for other parking changes. So it's up to you guys.
Okay, further? Heidi?
Trying to form this into a question. While it might seem like an immediate help for like households that have 3 cars because their kids moved home and they have a 1-lane driveway and they always have to be going and shuffling people around, that might be, that personal incentive, that self-interest, might really kind of supersede kind of that taking that long view of what happens if this type of parking is allowed in this neighborhood, which would incentivize or subsidize parking for rental properties, and subsidize, you know, and maybe depending on where it is, subsidize parking for businesses, or for the university, or take parking fees away from the university, or for apartment complexes. I mean, it does kind of speak to looking at it as a neighborhood by neighborhood situation, but I think that people really need to be clued in on this can have consequences that you may not see coming and may not understand that, you know, we're always, even in what appears to be neighborhoods with, say, homeowner occupied, a lot of homeowner occupied housing, there's always people looking for opportunities to turn housing into a business or a business into having more parking. And I think we probably would need to ensure that those regulations requiring rental housing to have enough parking was enforced strongly, so that those two things could coexist. People could be able to park on the street, and also there would be enough parking for residents of any particular house that was operated as a business. So I'm torn about this, and I can see that the yes. So Bridget, help me out with this.
Yeah, I know where you're going. All rental properties that are rooming houses or have 3 or more are required to have parking on site, 1.25 spaces. However, it doesn't, and that 1.25 allows for guests. However, our single-family rentals that are no more than 2 unrelated, they're parking on site in the driveway, but you have to understand that that doesn't allot for guests. So we find in the rental property, in the rentals that you're referring to, like in those fringe neighborhoods where Columbus has a lot, but like Highland doesn't, we have a lot of guests, right, that park. The rentals are there. They're pretty much everybody has a significant other, and they tend to park. So I do understand, but I will tell you the code does require them to show on site, but not necessarily in the smaller rentals.
So the code wouldn't be enough.
Correct.
To keep this
in certain neighborhoods
situation from getting worse.
In certain neighborhoods, yes. There's certain. I think it would be more in the ones where we're dealing with the single-family rentals in proximity to owner-occupied. On areas like Columbus or Willow, that type of thing.
But can I add to that? Maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, but the code would be enough, presuming people followed the code, and if they don't, we have to catch them. And we do that all the time, and this would make it more of an opportunity or harder to prove the catching, as Nick described the enforcement.
Correct, because we typically, literally, our code enforcement officers go out in the mornings and they basically track cars. We track them by plate and make, and we can tell then usually if it's an illegal rooming house, if they have more. And we also are tracking if there's similar vehicles, because if there's a similar vehicle parked in front of the house over X amount of days, they're no longer considered a guest, becomes a resident. So adding it will, for certain neighborhoods, it does need to be looked at in greater detail, for sure.
Thank you. Further? And let me remind you, these need to be questions, so.
Yeah, kind of was.
So I won't talk about stigmatizing rental properties and turning them into vacant houses. Anyhow, Jim, rather than taking a lot of time and energy of analyzing every neighborhood and every street in the city, would you think it'd be a good idea to go ahead on, what we probably have been doing in the past is take things as they come, with petitions, analyze them as they come, and still work something in there so you don't create a storage facility.
Yes, that's exactly what we meant.
Further? Gwen?
I just have a couple of just really quick questions. Are we getting requests elsewhere in the city to modify the parking Is this
No.
the first time this has been?
First time in my 15 years that I ever recall hearing this section of the code being
Okay.
requested to change.
Okay, because I have heard the
Others-
opposite. I've heard much more from the opposite side, that there's about parking issues and people parking on streets where they should. I've heard that more than I've heard people wanting to change it to increase parking. So that's why I wanted to ask. Okay. Have you, I know that you haven't had a chance to really dive into it yet. This is just preliminary. But if a resident, say if a street wants to sign a petition, what about undoing that? Is there, have you considered or had a chance to give a lot of thought to? So, we're talking about like neighborhood turnover, this and that. Okay, now we've got a couple of neighbors on the street that say, no, we don't want that anymore. Like in this particular example, on this particular street, if a resident at that street said, I don't want this anymore, I don't want these cars parked in front of my house, I want a petition to undo it. Have you thought about like a timeline for that, or not to create excess work? If it becomes, my fear is neighbor feuds and becoming involved in a neighbor issue that I don't want to put that our staff in the middle of.
Sure. I can only go by the experience that we've had over the last decade or more. When an area comes to us and asks for a petition, it doesn't happen often. You guys see it. There was a rash of them like 2014 or 2015. And they would come, they would get the petitions. Usually it's fairly well agreed upon in that area. It's usually not 51%. And they would come. If it would get changed, we've never heard anything from them back again. So I don't think this would be any different. We would need to, each one was looked at on a unique basis. Okay. I wouldn't recommend us changing them if it's only 50% of the people asking. Okay. And don't forget too, to do this, it takes some work. Okay, it's not just picking up the phone and saying, I want this, I'm done. They actually have to continue to work on it, and it must be really important to them and their neighbors if they go through and make it happen. And that effort shows how important it is, and usually if that's the case, they seem to stick. There's a lot of times we get complaints and say, well, if you do this, it'll solve it, and we never hear from them again. So,
Robin?
Yeah, to me, there's a reason that thing's been in place since 1964. The reason is there's been a transition in the city. The city's changed. People don't live in as many owner-occupied homes as they used to. I don't think this would be a big deal to a lot of people if these were people who had too many cars that owned their house and they were being pushed out in the front of the house on the street. I think that happens quite a bit for a lot of people. Nobody really gets that bummed about it. But they do get kind of upset when people from the outside come in and start parking. And I think that seems to be the bigger concern. I'm all in on the possibility of experimentation and how we're done, but Gwen kind of brought up, I think, how is that undone after it's done? That's a little greater concern. I would like to see if, in fact, if we implemented something like that, if that became problematic. But then, if it did, how do we undo it? And so I'm a little concerned about that. Like I said, the issue is there's been a transition in the way that people live here in the city and who owns what and why that's going to be, I think, somewhat problematic. I know it is kind of for me, and I don't even have a car. I got people parking in front of my house. They're there for a long time. You want to, and there are other things. There are some types of outgrowth from having vehicles on the street for an inordinate amount of time. If it looks bad, if you don't know what's going on, there are just a lot of, and I'm sure Nick probably has to deal with that type of situation where people are very suspect of what's transpiring, the depreciation, I think, for a lot of people and what they feel their property value is. It's just somewhat problematic, but, you know, I do think that I want to see if, in fact, this is able to help. What you're doing is helpful, as long as I think it doesn't really have that many negative implications for some of the neighborhoods that are a little in transition.
I'm trying to be respectful, but these should be questions, not comments. So, Roger?
Yeah, you've thrown out some numbers. Is it going to be 60% of the neighborhoods, 70% of the neighbors? I'm kind of curious, what would we set that at?
So we haven't looked at it yet.
Okay.
And we won't look at it unless you guys tell us you'd like us to look at it. If you guys say that, then we will look at it. And if you give us some thoughts on how hard or how much consensus you want to see, that would help us when we look at it.
Then the follow-up question, Jim, so that we don't get in trouble, what percentage have we used in the past? You follow what I'm saying?
I do.
So there's
I
some
follow what you're
consistency
saying.
there. Maybe you could come back and let us know.
Sure. I know with the traffic calming one, it's like 70%.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Further? Anyone from the audience wish to speak on this issue? Back to council.
I move that the administration looks lightly into what we discussed this evening.
Lightly?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, what we discussed would be a reasonable, I don't even know how to explain it. Otherwise, don't go in a full-fledged city thing, but see what simple program would work or not work.
Do we have a second?
Pretty open.
Do I have another motion?
I'll second it.
You'll second it? Okay. Discussion?
Yeah.
Roger?
I think what John is trying to say, can we get maybe just a little framework of how this might work in terms of, you know, a little more specifics without a full-blown piece of legislation in front of us. Just give us an idea of how it might work, and maybe we could have further discussion at another committee meeting.
Is that fine with you, John?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Passes. And that ends health and safety.
All right,
Streets and sidewalks.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Oh, speaking of roads, we have an acceptance of a road and public utility easement, and it's Bridget and Jim.
I'm going to pinch hit for Tim tonight.
Okay.
The Davy Drill property is now under the ownership of Hometown Bank, and they are getting the parcel prepared and showing it for sale. And through that, they did a survey. And if you look at the map that was provided, at the intersection of Walnut and Maple, the city actually has roadway and utilities that cross over that. So Hometown is offering the city perpetual road and public utility easements so that if we need to get in there, we have that ability. So this is before you to ask approval with emergency for the acceptance of that perpetual road and public utility easement. It's actually listed actually on their survey itself.
Questions from council? Bridget. Heidi.
Is there a downside to this?
No. Quite honestly, it's a housekeeping issue, and it really needs to be done. So no, it is something that we are recommending, which we usually do not make recommendations, but in this case, we would like to be able to fix our road and our utility if it happens to be on private site.
Other questions from council? Seeing none, anyone in the audience? Back to council.
Move to approve with
Second.
emergency.
Second.
Any comment necessary? Seeing no comment, all those in favor signify by, oh, wait a minute, with the emergency.
Yes, with emergency.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? There you go.
Thank you.
All right, next one is a 24-inch water line relocation, and we need a memorandum of understanding with Kent State University, Jim? Is that what this is all about?
Yes, that's what this is about. We have an existing 24-inch water line it's parallel Summit Street, and for a small part of it, it goes out of Summit Street's right away, and it's onto Kent State's campus. And it needed to be relocated for the building. So this memorandum would set the framework for it to be relocated. Items like we'll split the cost 50-50, Kent State would manage the relocation, and then we would get an easement for where the new location is. So we're requesting your approval to execute that agreement.
Any questions from City Council? Seeing none, any questions from the audience? Back to City Council.
Move to approve with emergency.
Yep. Second.
No further comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
There you go.
Okay, Finance Committee, Mr. DeLeon.
I think we're going to go with Joan and Public Entities Pool Grant for the Health Department. Pool
Yes,
grant.
so I'm before you tonight to ask for your approval to accept some additional funding from the Public Entities Pool, which is our insurance company. They've offered another $1,000, and we thought that we could use that for an AED that has a bleed kit, a box, and a sign for the clinic space. We currently do not have this, and we think it would be appropriate. So we respectfully ask to accept that grant.
Questions? Anybody in the audience? Back to council.
Move to approve
Second.
with emergency.
With the emergency. All those in favor?
Aye.
That one passes.
And then the second item is for the health department. We were also notified that we were awarded an extension and an addition to the Healthy Eating and Active Living Grant, which we abbreviate as HEAL. For 2024, this amount has been increased from $10,000, which we've already spent. Now we get an additional $25,000. So I think we can do even more with that. So we're excited, and they've already said that we can have it if you would graciously accept it.
That's free money? Okay. Any questions? Anybody in the audience? Back to council.
Move to authorize with the emergency.
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah, I just want to say I am just so excited about all of the funding that Joan and her department have been able to get in for the benefit of the citizens that we serve. And I think that we're just really showing what a city health department, a city of our size, can do. And it wasn't that long ago where our very existence was threatened.
Right.
And so I just want to say that, kudos.
Oh, well, thank you. I've got a great staff.
Further? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The only item,
That's it.
Board of Control, Michael.
Oh, Border Control. I'll go over there. Oh, we forgot.
You were in the restroom. Or someplace.
You want to start the people out?
We'll do it.
Okay. So we've got the minutes from September.
How many rental?
Oh, he's here for exec session. Oh, you're here for the exec session?
In favor?
Aye, opposed, and then we got.
I get a little irritated.
One item.
because, I've got one guy who's been in the house 15 years.
We don't need Gary.
Thanks,
Mike.
We're good.
Okay, I'd like to move an executive session.
Been here 7 years.
Number one, preparing for, conducting, or reviewing.
That kind of ticks me off a little bit.
Hey, John,
I like our rental.
he's making a motion.
Moving for an executive session to talk about three different things: preparing for, conducting, or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment. 2, conferences with an attorney for the public body concerning disputes involving the public body that are the subject of pending or imminent court action. And 3rd, to consider the purchase of property for public purposes, the sale of property at competitive bidding, or the sale or other disposition of unneeded, obsolete, or unfit for use property.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mike. Roll call, please.
Mr. Amrine?
Yes.
Mr. DeLeon?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhar?
Yes.
Mr. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer-Bish? Yes. Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Turner?
Yes.
Need a motion to excuse Garrett and Tracy.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second by Mike. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We'll give 5 minutes for everybody that shouldn't be here to leave.
So we'll start with one of the two proposals.
You're in control, Dave. Should they both be in the room at the same time?
No.